Welcome everyone, I'm Aleksandra Klassen, RE100 Senior Impact Manager at the Climate Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to the latest discussion in the Resource Calling webinar series. For the members of our audience that don't know Resource, we are the European Alliance of corporate buyers and sellers of renewable electricity. Today, I'll be moderating this webinar where we will chat about issues such as how do we ensure that corporate PPAs remain both sustainable and profitable throughout their lifetime. And is this a balance that is easy to keep? Does it need constant maintenance? And given the current environment, are risk preferences changing? So before we start, I would like to mention some housekeeping rules. This event is being recorded and will be published on the Resource website afterwards. We'll be answering questions from the audience towards the end, so please do submit your questions on the panel provided as we go along. I welcome all of you to stay 1 hour with me, and what is more important, I encourage you to ask questions to the 4 top industry leaders that are joining us today. So we have Cyndi Kohuska, who's a global manager, energy and utilities at Danone. We have Javier Vaquerizo Alonso, who's the head of global commercial office at Enel Green Power. Alexis Manuel, who's the business lead for green power solutions at Engie, and Zephyr Taylor, the global director of renewable energy at Mars. So first I will call Cyndi and have a chat with her, then I will call Javier, Alexis, and then Zephyr, and bring them all into the conversation to hear their perspectives. So if you've been following the Resource Calling webinar series, you may notice that today's topic is broader than the others, keeping sustainability and profitability on track through corporate power purchase agreements. You may be like me initially and think who's sustainability and who's profitability, the sellers or the buyers? But while we recognize that there are some conflicting interests between the two parties, the success of the market depends on signing deals based on shared interests. So no one wants to lose money. Obviously, losing money undermines investor confidence, and which can ultimately stymie a market, especially one as nascent as the one that we are discussing today. And we know that the scale of decarbonization that we require to get to net zero is massive. So for corporate PPAs to play a greater role, the risks and benefits need to be appropriately understood, priced, and allocated. There are several market pull instruments that are enabling businesses to buy renewables at scale in more ways in Europe, but innovation through new contract structures, for example, also introduces different risks. So you add the pandemic to the mix and uncertainty spikes. So in the session today, our speakers will have unique perspectives on how they define risks and how they manage short-term and long-term risks through corporate PPAs. Danone and Mars, with their respective sourcing strategies, represent the corporate view and what they require as they increasingly move towards greening their global operations, while Enel Green Power and Engie are in the business of matching upstream supply with downstream demand to deliver bankable projects. So let's get started, and let's call Cyndi now. Cyndi is the Global Manager, Energy and Utilities at Danone.
Hello.
That's not Cyndi. Hi, Cyndi. How are you doing?
Hi. Oh, hi, Alexandra. Good. How are you doing, Alexandra?
I'm good. I'm sorry to catch you off guard like that. Just wanted to give you a call. Where are you at the moment?
No problem. Well, actually, I've got the luxury of working from home, contributing to reducing CO2 emissions from transport. And for me, I always preferred working at home, so it's not a problem in
Great.
these
Where's
difficult
home?
times. In Belgium. I'm at a farm in Belgium.
Oh, lovely, lovely. So let's kick off. I thought we can start by taking a broader view. Wanted to know what role are corporate PPAs currently playing in Danone's strategy for reaching your renewable electricity targets? And as you're planning to go 100% renewables for your production sites by 2030, what are your expectations for their role in your sourcing portfolio in the next decade?
Okay, well, the good news is that in 2019, we were 42% renewable electricity. And in 2020, at the end of 2020, we should be at 54%, providing the sun shines, the wind blows, and we've got water and geothermal, etc. Initially, when Danone first went out on committed to RE100, the quick win was always RECs. Let's buy RECs, let's buy geos. But that's what we consider now greenwashing. And we're looking more and more towards the PPAs, offsite PPAs and on-site where possible. And so we've been moving in countries where we were purchasing RECs. We're moving towards PPAs, which we have signed several in the last year, in the last 2 years, and this year as well. And going away from the RECs, going towards PPAs, and then, as I said, also on-site. But the on-site, we're not doing the investment, we're doing PPAs.
Great. That is a trend that we're seeing through some other RE100 members as well. That's kind of RECs are the way in, and then they start to get more familiar with the market and move in that direction. So while it's challenging, I would imagine, to reduce your carbon footprint while increasing production volumes, which is important for Danone. How do you ensure that corporate PPAs are ticking both the business and sustainability boxes? And since gaining more experience with corporate PPAs, have your preferences or strategies changed?
We really like, and we always like, flexible and innovative PPAs. So in any PPA that we've signed, we always have the flexibility. We can add to the volumes. And then at the end, if the only solution is to buy RECs, that's just going to top off our 100% commitment.
And then when
but
you
we
say
don't we don't like standard contract templates. We like to be innovative with our suppliers.
Okay. And when you say flexibility, what are you referencing to pricing, to how do you really define that?
Flexibility, I refer to as offtake.
Okay.
So yeah, if our offtake is increasing, we've got flexibility in the contracts to address this.
Great. And then in terms of variable or fixed price PPAs, do you have a preference, or depends on what you're looking at in terms of the contracts?
Probably not a question that we can answer right now, because we've got a lot of competitors in the audience.
Okay, sure. And then I wanted to take the conversation a little bit towards the model that you've used for your carbon neutral facility in Ireland. And I was wondering how replicable that is and what your plans are for expanding that.
Actually, that's a very good question. It's very replicable. And we're looking at right now, Danone also has a commitment to zero emission factories. And we've got flagship factories that we're working on. As we all know, the biggest challenge is a thermal challenge for thermal energy. And that is really factory and site specific anywhere we go in the world. But we definitely are taking this model and expanding on it.
Great. And then have you, I'm sure there's been probably some hiccups in terms of the pandemic. Have you experienced any challenges that you think will be long term, or is it just kind of teething issues in terms of the market?
I think the biggest issues we've seen because of the pandemic is lack of material getting to the market. So wind turbines, solar panels, and maybe not just because of production, but also because of importing and because of getting to factories, and people have to be 15 days late. A good example is in Indonesia, where we have a lot of projects going on right now. The boats with the solar panels can't dock in Indonesia. So these are the bigger issues we're seeing, and we're also seeing a slowdown in investors' commitments or developers' commitments to projects, which sometimes is frustrating to us because we want to move forward.
I see. And I guess I want to, before I bring in some of the other speakers, I wanted to touch on a very big deal that Danone has signed in the US with Enel Green Power. Can you take us through some of the success factors of that deal, and how how you expect to maintain that contract, which I believe is for 12 years?
Yeah, so first of all, we dealt with a supplier that's very flexible and willing to work with us. They know we're very challenging, and they met our challenges. One thing that's very interesting is that we didn't sign one PPA. We've actually got two separate PPAs with Enel, because Danone what's very important to Danone is that we purchase the green electricity in the country, or as in the US, we would say the ISO, where our factories are. So we have 2 separate PPAs with Enel for several factories. And that's really, it was delivered on time, and we've had no issues with that PPA at all.
Great.
The one thing something else is a bit different in the US. Enel is a developer only. They're not a retailer. So we actually, Enel produces the physical green power. It's delivered to the hub where a retailer will take it and then deliver it us to each factory and do the balancing of the power. So it's what we could, what we term as, what a term we can use in Europe is sleeving.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a sleeving agreement with the retailer.
Right, right, great. I guess I can bring Javier in now. We'll make sure that you're part of the conversation, Cyndi, and the other questions, and we'll have some questions after. But thanks a lot for that. And let's call Javier now. And Javier is the head of Global Commercial Office at Enel Green Power. Hi, Javier.
Hello, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. I'm also working from home here in Rome, in Italy. So far so good.
Okay, how's the weather in Rome at the moment?
Today is a sunny day, but you know that in Rome during October and November it used to rain a lot. So we are waiting for the rain in a couple of days, maybe.
Yes, in London we have that problem often. So Javier, I'd actually like to start with the same question that I just asked Cyndi. On your side, what was the success factor that made the US project, which I believe was Enel Green Power's largest operational wind farm, what made that project a reality?
I mean, I think that Cyndi mentioned almost all of them, but I would say that, yeah, flexibility is the right word. And also, I think just to approach focused on a tailor-made solution. As Cyndi mentioned, Danone is a challenging off-taker, but in terms of the kind of tailor-made deals that they are looking for, but it has been a pleasure and a really interesting experience to structure this deal that, as Cyndi mentioned, has a lot of complexities embedded. I would say that a key of success also is the economies of scale of this big, large wind farm in Texas, and I would say that also the contribution of this multitasking team that has been working together with this retailer and our trading group and our renewable division colleagues together with the Danone team. I think that the teamwork has been another big important success key.
And are you seeing that you're doing more contracts that are kind of bespoke like this, or do you also work with clients that just have contracts that are more, using template contracts, standardized?
I mean, of course, we are open to do both, but we like to embrace complexity. I think that we are a big player with an integrated player. In different markets, we have different levels of integration. So we are quite open and flexible in order to structure different things. Those markets where we have retail activity, we can go directly across the entire value chain and provide physical deals. In other markets in which we are more focused on renewables and trading activities, like in the US, we could eventually structure these complex deals, including some offtake volume flexibilities and also these sleeve balancing services. So I would say that we like both, but we are not afraid of a known template or contract. I think that we are happy exploring also those complexities. I think that embracing complexity sometimes is the only way forward in order to find the agreement zone and the right allocation of risk, taking into consideration all the elements, let's say, of a corporate PPA.
Yeah, great, and it can play into your strengths in terms of having those capabilities within green power. So I wanted to ask you how you've seen a change, if you have seen really a significant change in how companies are managing risk and corporate competitiveness after the pandemic, and if you think that this kind of protracted low price environment will affect the types of contracts that are being sought after.
I would say that more than affecting the type of contracts, that probably in the past we also had those complex or different structures. I think that this situation is changing a little bit. The amount of each of these structures is being requested from the corporates. And the main reason is that obviously in this price situation with the creditworthiness concerns, I would say that somehow the risk aversion of a lot of C&I customers changed. And now probably some C&I customers are more concerned on the risk of having an out of the money PPA in the long run, and not so focused on taking advantage of a short-term benefit of having a lower price through a long-term PPA compared to the forward 2 years, 3 years forward reference. So we are detecting that somehow clients are trying to explore as well those structures, the sending price, market followings with a floor, providing lower thresholds or lower price thresholds for the client in the long run. Another consequence I would say is that obviously this situation is leading to a lot of uncertainty. So a lot of clients probably are using these RFPs that we are receiving right now in order also to make the right price discovery, to understand which projects are still on track, which developers, as Cyndi said, some developers are having some difficulties. We have supply chain disruptions, etc. So I think that, but the activity is still moving forward. We see a lot of interest from corporates, a lot of RFPs, but probably those processes are going to take a little bit longer than before because of all these uncertainties we need to tackle.
Yeah, it sounds like definitely interest, but some more caution at the moment. But how does this play out on the financier side in terms of kind of how they manage risk and what contracts are considered bankable or not?
That I would say that piece of the equation is the one that used to change later, or it's quite stable. I would say that bankability is still a must. Unfortunately, because of the credit worthiness situation, sometimes the sellers or developers are obliged to increase the request for credit support. And I would say that probably we need to see a more flexibility or innovative solutions from the financial institutions. But I mean, we have few examples. I remember some months ago we saw the first renewable project in Denmark being financed through mortgage loans, and maybe in the future we will see some other innovative solutions. But I would say that for the time being, the credit support is still a must, and we need to adapt as a developer those credit support requests to the bankability requests that we are receiving from lenders. So that's my answer to this question. That I think is a very important piece of all these corporate PPA new trend. But as I said, bankability is still the main concept we need to keep in mind as developers of projects.
I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the point of creditworthiness that you were mentioning. Is there, in terms of the impacts on the economy, the slowdown with the pandemic, and with some business sectors being particularly impacted, do you see these businesses less likely to get these contracts across? Is there a noticeable difference in terms of the engagement with some sectors that you're having?
I would say that, of course, that there are some sectors that are going to be more impacted than others, and probably it is going to depend on the particular individual situation, on both sides. I would say it's not only corporates but also developers. But I would say that I think that there are going to be some companies willing to probably provide the needed credit support, because they are convinced that the benefit of embracing sustainability or moving forward, helping to this energy transition is going to impact their businesses, and the awareness of their customers is pushing them to do so. So I would say that it's going to depend on the kind of trade-off each company is going to assess internally. So I would say that we will see probably some companies willing to increase the credit support because they are convinced and committed to moving forward, and others probably are going to need a little bit more time in order to take that kind of decisions.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I guess for my last question on this segment for you on the call is about a little bit more about how Enel Green Power, what kind of mechanisms you're using to hedge against power price volatility, low output, in order to guarantee revenues. Like, how much of this is built into the contracts with the off-takers, and how much of it is done kind of individually by you and other mechanisms?
I mean, our sales strategy for new investments is adapted and tailor-made. Our focus is always based on the specific market situation, the regulatory scheme, the market design, and at the end of the day, the offtake alternatives at disposal. Then, of course, we need to introduce into this cocktail the level of integration of Enel Group in that particular market. So we used to put in place a mixed solution for the offtake of the new investment. In those markets where we have retail activity, we leverage on our integrated portfolio. Our trading group and our retail group are managing those positions, so we are able to structure this mix of mixing long-term PPAs, corporate PPAs with retail sales and some integrated portfolio management. In other countries in which we don't have that retail activity, we used to mix innovative hedging solutions, including, for example, a proxy revenue swap. For example, for this big wind farm in Texas, another portion is allocated on that kind of contract, together with hedges that we are managing through our trading group, and together with corporate PPAs. So at the end of the day, we try to implement a strategy based on diversifying risk and trying to capture some upside in case we have some capabilities to manage certain risk according to our integrated position. And of course, there are other markets in which we have a few possibilities. So, in Africa, for example, we are bidding into regulated tenders in order to open this business in certain countries. It depends a lot on the complexity of the market, the maturity of the market, and also on our level of integration in that specific country.
Okay, thanks a lot, Javier. That's really, really interesting. I want to bring in Alexis now to add to your comments, see what his perspectives are, and then we'll chat after.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So Alexis, we're going to call him now. He's the business lead of Green Power Solutions at Engie.
Hello.
Hi, Alexis. Can you hear me?
How are you? I can. And
Good.
you?
Yes, I can hear you well. Thanks for taking my call. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Good, good. So we've got London, Belgium, Rome on the call. Where are you dialing in from?
And I'm in Paris. I'm in Paris at home, trying to hide from the kids who are just out of school.
I see. Oh yeah, it's that time again. Okay. Well, hopefully we can have a quick chat and they won't
Should be fine.
disturb me much. So Alexis, my my first question to you is kind of about your experience recently in different companies. So I understand that you fairly recently switched from the buy side at Solvay to work for Engie, which calls itself a green midstreamer. And I would love to start with your take on what you see as the main differences, the main similarities from the two sides of the negotiating table, and how Engie really works across the value chain.
Okay, thanks for the question, Aleksandra. It's true that the main focus working at from the buyer side, while at Solvay, was really to define what would be our PPA strategy. Whether we would go for virtual or physical PPAs, which geographies to prioritize, if we would be aiming to maximize CO2 reductions or to aim for deals that may seem more profitable, and of course, identifying all the risks that we were ready to onboard as an off-taker. Defining the strategy, I think, is really the hard part on the buyer side. And then once you define it, you still have to validate it at the senior executive level of the group. Now at Engie, it's I would say kind of the opposite. But just if you enable me one comment, Engie is more than a green midstreamer. Our ambition is really to become the leader in the energy transition, providing full range of decarbonization solutions, energy efficiency, renewable power, but also green gas, hydrogen, carbon offsets. Okay, but let's get back to green power. Today, there's a real revolution occurring in the power sector thanks to the increased competitiveness of the renewables. Okay, but increasing renewable capacity on the grid also requires new capabilities. As you know, of course, the production of renewable assets is variable, and they need sun or water or wind to be able to produce. But our customers want their power when they need it, not only when it's sunny. So our role as midstreamer is really to reconcile the power as it is produced by these assets and the power as it is consumed by our customers. Okay, and to do this, we have to work on the full value chain. Upstream, it means that we have to build a portfolio of diversified assets, wind, solar, hydro. Midstream, we have developed new capabilities, new models to be able to have very fine weather forecasts, artificial intelligence to constantly balance production and consumption. And finally, downstream, we also see our role, I would say, as an advisor, not just a PPA supplier, but as an advisor to our customer to find tailored solutions. PPAs is not a one-size-fits-all, and it's really depending on each buyer's strategy and constraints. And these are the main challenges, I would say, on the supplier midstream side.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting. I've seen that Engie is hoping that PPAs will deliver roughly half of the renewables in your portfolio over the next few years. So you're really kind of banking on that growth. I'm wondering if the pandemic has changed this outlook in any way, and what new business challenges and opportunities you see being posed by the current environment.
Yes, so you're right. Last year, we announced our objective to install 9 gigawatts of additional capacity within 3 years, and half of which through PPAs. Today, a bit more than halfway through, we're well on track to deliver and even exceed this objective. So this means that even though the environment is not easy, we still see sustained interests from our customers. And I can say that the momentum is still there. And hopefully Cyndi from Danone and Zephyr from Mars are here to testify. This being said, we all realize that the level of uncertainty we're dealing with today is huge. Uncertainty over the pandemic, over its duration, over its impact on the economy. So we have to integrate this uncertainty and deal with it. Okay. One of the biggest challenges, and it was touched upon already by Javier, will be the credit risk. Some companies, some sectors have already been downgraded today, and it's true that this may reduce the pool of potential off-takers, of potential PPA buyers in the coming years.
And I guess we can jump to that actually in terms of like the pool of buyers in specific tech sectors, because I understand you've increasingly been working with large industrial groups. You've signed deals this year with Air Liquide in Spain and Ineos in Belgium. So I wanted to see how corporate PPAs add value to this kind of specialist group, And do they have unique requirements when it comes to balancing business and sustainability as compared to some other commercial sectors?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks for mentioning these deals. Recently, we've signed 2 large deals with Air Liquide and Ineos. And just to mention, these deals will enable the reduction of 1.4 million tons of CO2. These large energy-intensive industrials really have increased pressure from their customers to reduce their CO2 emissions. Customers generally look more and more into Scope 3 emissions, into the emissions of their supplier. So I would say the pressure is coming upstream of the value chain to large energy-intensive industrials. Now, PPAs still are, I think, the main lever to generate significant emission reductions at affordable costs. And this has been very well integrated even by industrials. However, energy-intensive industrials have a cost base where energy can be a significant cost and power can represent up to 40% of their production costs. So they cannot afford to pay more for their power. Otherwise, they face losing competitivity and reducing the sales of their products. So these types of customers are generally very knowledgeable. They know the energy markets as well, if not sometimes better than us. And they're looking for, I would say, a diverse set of solutions to mitigate their risks and reduce their supply costs. So PPAs, yes, but with reduced risk and increased competitiveness. So very, very challenging.
Yeah. I wanted to pick up on a point that Javier was talking about when he said that, you know, some customers now are kind of going after short-term benefits, and over the long term, when they can save more money with a certain type of PPA, they're maybe being a little bit more cautious to that approach. Have you seen that play out with the customers that you're dealing with?
I would say that more and more customers are trying to understand what the underlying dynamics of the market where they source power are. What's the renewable capacity today, but what will it be in 5-10 years time, and how this can impact the prices that they will pay for, or the market prices at that time. And I would say that deals that seem profitable today may not be profitable on the long run, and buyers have more and more integrated this, so they really try to get more market knowledge, more market insights before taking a decision.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, as the market develops, you know, there are going to be more players there, and can be learning much more from the, you know, the first companies that have done that. So thank you so much, Alexis. I'll bring you into the chat afterwards, and wanted to call Zephyr now. Zephyr is the Global Director of Renewable Energy at Mars.
Hello, how's it going?
Hi, Zephyr. I'm surprised you heard that. I think my phone is running low on battery, so I
just timed it in my head, actually. I think I just heard a tiny beep. It was good enough.
Telepathically connected. Where are you based, Zephyr?
I'm based out of our corporate headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Okay, all right. So we've got basically Europe covered, and now the US as well. So thanks for taking the call today, Zephyr. There's already been quite a rich conversation, so there's lots of things that I would like to pick up with you, but in a similar vein, I just wanted to start a little bit more top level, and understand that Mars has gone fully renewable in several markets already. So I wanted to know what your strategy is for signing corporate PPAs to meet your renewable electricity targets, and if your approach or your preferences has changed over the last few years.
Sure. So, you know, as you mentioned, we do have a commitment by 2040 to be 100% renewable. And in that process, the journey and pathway to getting there, we typically prioritize markets by our greenhouse gas emissions footprint, followed closely by economic advantage and opportunity in these corporate PPAs. So that is to say, first and foremost, we are looking to reduce our carbon footprint and offset emissions. At the same time, like all corporates, I think in this space, we're very keen to not pay a premium for renewable energy. So we're looking for economic advantage. We're looking for creative, innovative, and flexible contracts. And so in some cases, what that results in is we have a priority market that we don't feel is quite ready in terms of market maturity or availability of the types of contracting structures that we prefer, to where we would actually take a wait and see approach. At the same time, we might be more flexible in other markets where we feel that there is significant real-time either project pipeline and or economic advantage opportunity. That all falls under a broad strategy of preferring 100% coverage options on a country by country basis, which, as everyone on the call would appreciate, that most often means offsite PPAs. I think we look at markets first and foremost to say, can we find a 100% solution with a single asset or multiple assets that are offsite PPAs? In the absence of that opportunity, then we would pivot to look at on-site solutions or private wire. But our priority so far has always been to sign large offsite corporate PPAs in achieving our 100% target by 2040.
Great. And you kind of touched on it already in terms of the way that you assess some markets. There might be priorities, but not quite ready. So I'm wondering, in terms of as Mars continues to grow, does easier access to renewables play a role in your decisions in terms of expanding an existing and new markets?
Yes, absolutely. So every time we open a new site, an assessment is done for options for renewable energy coverage for that respective site. So it's always baked in to our business scale up and expansion process. It's something at Mars. Sustainability, quite frankly, is baked into almost everything we do, from the top to the bottom. It's taken very seriously, and so there's always a concerted effort to ensure that we have options for renewable energy coverage in any existing market where we were to scale up in, or new market we were to enter into. Now, as everyone again can appreciate, markets are quite dynamic and fluid things. So there are some times when a market in the current time period is not prepared or ready to offer renewable energy solutions that are appropriate for Mars, but we see light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, in terms of policy and regulatory reforms and maturity of commercial fundamentals and evolution of varying contracting structures that we feel will be appropriate for our needs. And so we're always keeping an eye on that as well in our current and future business expansion opportunities.
That's very interesting. And then when you're prioritizing your project pipeline, what do you view more importantly, or how do you basically balance the environmental benefits, the local grid impacts, and most importantly, cost?
Yeah, so as I touched on briefly before, first and foremost, this is about reducing our carbon footprint. So the environmental impacts are absolutely critical. They underpin our core reasoning for doing this. At the same time, we do feel that there is significant economic advantage to be achieved, to be realized through procuring renewable energy. As many people can appreciate, in many markets, renewable energy is the least cost generation source. And so we also see economic upside attached to our displacement of our greenhouse gas emissions and our overall decrease of our environmental impact footprint. So, I would say top line, it's the environmental benefits that we get from procuring renewable energy, and then quickly or closely following that, it is economic advantage that we can secure. And that pipeline prioritization process, for me, I sit in our commercial divisions. I'm the global commercial director. That's our term for procurement. I work hand in glove with the global sustainability team at Mars, who really own the top line pipeline in terms of what markets are the priority, et cetera. So we work very closely together in identifying which markets are appropriate and have the highest value to us from an environmental impact reduction standpoint and from an economic opportunity and advantage standpoint. And sometimes you can see some moving around of those priority markets depending on how each of those respective drivers are weighted at that, at any time that we were to go to a market. So
yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds like you're saying that corporate PPAs are still a very economic way of reducing your carbon footprint, but can't escape a question about the pandemic. So I'm wondering, in this kind of whole, again, low price environment and more volatility, are you expecting kind of different things from contracts? Are you expecting more flexibility? We've heard from Javier and Alexis based on what they've seen. Just wanted to get your perspective on that. Like what is more required in the market now?
And, I thought I would be able to participate in this webinar and avoid talking about COVID, but I was wrong. I wanted one opportunity in the past 6 months to not have to mention COVID. So I would say fundamentally, our sourcing strategy for renewable energy has not changed in light of the pandemic. We're always and always have been looking for flexibility and creativity in our contracting structures that, from the Mars principle of mutuality, we feel is beneficial both to the supplier and to us. At the same time, I think you need to appreciate that many of these deals traditionally, and I think will continue to be so going forward, are relatively long-term. So they're not 1 to 2 year deals. So when you think of the classic corporate PPA of 10, 15 plus years, you can smooth out, I believe, some of the short-term impacts that we've seen, or knock on wood, hopefully short-term impacts that we've seen from the COVID pandemic. And I think that's already playing out in a lot of power markets around the world. So I take a very close look at not just where the markets are today because of the impact of the pandemic, but where they appear to be going over the coming many years. And so I think in light of that, there's not a dramatic shift in our thinking of the long-term opportunity for renewable energy sourcing and corporate PPAs that we would sign, as well as the markets that we would be able to execute these in. We still feel very confident that renewable energy is the right pathway to go on, and that it will continue to be an attractive market commercially and from a sustainability perspective.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And is there, I guess, just coming back to this idea of, again, this balancing the sustainability, and if you're looking at long-term contracts and kind of guessing where the price curve is going to be, are you thinking about those kind of reducing that risk as you go along, more so than you have been before? Or is it still pretty much at the same place?
There's probably a bit of a heightened sensitivity. I think that's fair to say in terms of long-term risk of contracts in light of the pandemic. That said, we are always very keen to manage risk in our renewable energy sourcing endeavors. And so we're flexible for different types of pricing structures based on the needs of the business, as well as the particular unique circumstances of each respective market that we're sourcing renewables in. We take a very, very keen and studious look at the risk profile of all the deals that we sign. And that is, I think, part and parcel to operating in complex long-term contracting environments where you inherently have a lot of risk baked in when you're signing a long-term contract. Also quite dynamic markets, which the power sector and renewable thermal are. So sure, there's heightened risk, but at the same time, we've always been very attentive to the risk profile of all of the deals that we've looked at and have signed.
Great. Well, thanks, Zephyr. We've got some questions coming in, but before I go to the Q&A, I wanted to ask Alexis and Javier and Cyndi, if you have any reflections on what your industry colleagues have been saying, if you wanted to add anything. No? Okay. All right.
I think we are pretty aligned on the analysis. Maybe just talking about these pandemic effect, I would say that it's true that sourcing strategies or policies or efforts are there, not being changed fundamentally. But I would say that the approach for the structuring of a corporate PPA, I would say that part of the negotiation is changing dramatically. So now, as some colleagues already said, there are a lot of more interest and focus on analyzing and assessing risk. I would say taking into consideration a probabilistic analysis with a lot of modeling. I would say that part of the structuring effort is clearly more important because of the huge uncertainty we need to address, and probably that is leading to those, I would say, different price structures and volume structures that now we are starting to see in the RFP request. So maybe before COVID, the number of RFPs in which we could eventually see requests for different price structure, different from fixed price, flat price, were few. And now I would say that those requests are increasing.
I see. And then, clearly, I mean, Mars and Danone, you guys are doing great work, and you have teams that are working on this, and you're really leading in this space. But in order to grow the market, we want more types of buyers involved. And again, it's much more difficult, obviously, for small and medium-sized companies to get involved in the corporate PPA market. So I can just imagine that if there's this focus on understanding the risks more, those types of organizations just might not have the in-house capacity to do that. And I'm wondering if you think that, again, a standardized contract like that of what EFIT has worked on could help those companies through this, kind of more of a turmoil time.
Aleksandra, I'd like to take a first a stab at this before Zephyr. There's two ways of looking at it. We're looking at some of our suppliers or scope 3 that are smaller, and we're actually including them in our PPAs. So we're bringing in the expertise that Danone has, and they can benefit from that. That could be packaging, it could be farmers. It's quite wide range. And I guess to answer your other question, because that's always a debate that we have within Resource and with WBCSD and a lot of the organizations, is should we have standard contracts? Maybe for SMEs, but I think, Alexis, don't laugh. Maybe for SMEs, but for the bigger, I think it'll take away from being innovative if there's a standard contract for everybody.
Yeah, I would second Cyndi's comment that Mars is very keen, and we are actively engaging our supply chain, partly to address our scope 3 emissions footprint, but also to help bring other corporates along in this journey of renewable energy sourcing. In that endeavor, I would say standardized contracts have certainly a certain amount. I mean, they have value. It's undoubtable that for corporates that are unfamiliar with the complexities that go into these power purchase agreements, that a certain level of standardization is beneficial. At the same time, I agree with Cyndi that can limit flexibility and innovation and creativity in these deal structures. Maybe more importantly than that, though, I think it's important to understand that there's so much that goes into these deals from the early to the final stages, and the standardization of contracts is not going to solve or capture all of that complexity in terms of identifying your sourcing policies and your strategies, setting guardrails for what types of deals you're willing and interested to do or not, going through the internal governance and approvals process, understanding just the top line economics and risks that are inherent in the deal itself, aside from some of the nuances of the contract risks itself, just understanding what are the risks to this deal, what are the risks from the counterparty, things that a standardized contract don't perfectly capture. They do somewhat, et cetera. But I think what is really necessary, and again, Mars is doing something very similar to Danone here, is we are bringing our expertise, our deal structuring, our power and renewable energy sector expertise to bear in a capacity building nature to some of our supply chain members to help them understand how to get these deals stood up, how to understand them internally in terms of governance and approvals, et cetera. At the same time, we are equally interested and keen in working with very sophisticated members of our supply chain that have comparable expertise and experience in sourcing renewables to Mars, but we are still interested in partnering with them as a demonstration effect to show how these consortium structures can work, as well as just helping mobilize further investment into these markets and push renewables to the forefront.
If I may, yeah. I fully agree that standardized contract is maybe one piece, but it's not enough. And Cyndi, I expected your answer. That's why I was laughing. I think utilities also have a key role to play because some of the buyers, SMEs, etc., are not geared to sign these complex long-term contracts. And our role as utility, as midstreamer, is also to accompany them and to propose them solutions that are more geared, I would say, to their capabilities today.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Going to move on to a few questions because we only have about 10 minutes left. So one of the questions is on accounting consequences. So what are the accounting consequences of credit support from the buyer perspective? And does this imply some sort of consolidation?
No, it should not.
Very
no,
good.
not a consolidation from the buyer perspective. It should not. So I don't think that should be an issue.
Yeah, I see you nodding, Cyndi.
And I think what we do as a buyer is one of the, we always look at because we're IFRS 16, Zephyr year gap accounting, which is they're coming closer and closer together right now in for renewable energy. But we always structure our projects to ensure we won't have any accounting issues. Mm-hmm. And that goes for on-site projects, for on-site steam purchase agreements, for on-site power purchase agreements, and then again for the off-site. So, okay. Yeah, we're quite clear with that.
Yeah, similarly for Mars, we have a very thorough and comprehensive accounting treatment review done for all of our contracts. I wouldn't agree, though, that none of these contracts end up in consolidation on the balance sheet. I think there are variations and forms of some of these structures that would result in that. I think the key is to have a very thorough review and investigation of the contract structure and clauses to ensure that you can avoid that, assuming that that's critical for the business. But we always put a fair amount of effort into avoiding any accounting treatment challenges or pitfalls that are unpalatable to the business, and that's part of the internal review, approvals, and governance process for all of our deals.
Okay. Thanks, Zephyr. Thanks, Cyndi. I have a question for Cyndi now. Cyndi, let me know if it's a little bit too much to handle. But someone is asking you, was it a conscious decision to sleeve power into your retailer in order to maintain those current supply base and supplier relationships?
That's a good question. In the US it was, and I think Javier, you'll admit that we're probably the first ones that did it together. It comes really from a European. The first time I ever did it was in the United Kingdom with another company. So the developer was not the retailer. So we had the sleeving in the States. In the US, it was a very new process and it was very challenging. It was less challenging probably to Javier and myself because we come from Europe, we had the experience, but really challenging already internally for Danone to understand. I know the team that I was working with, the US team, it took in Enel took some time for us to understand it. And then when we put out the RFP for the retailers, some of them just didn't understand the concept at all.
Mm.
And we were really happy to be able to have found someone that did. So it was, yes, it was a conscious decision because we wanted to deal with a reputable developer. And if the developer does not have the retail license, we're trying to talk Enel into having a retail license in the US. Engie, you have the retail, you're a developer and you have the retailer, and you also buy from other projects. So the Engie, what Engie's doing in the US is a little bit different than what Enel is. And we're open to all of them as long as we can have a good supply from a reputable partner.
Okay, great. Thanks,
I hope
Cyndi.
that answers the question.
It does. It definitely does. We definitely have some more questions, but we can't get to them now, so we'll try our best to answer them, separately after the webinar. But I have one last question for all of you, and basically, if you could go back in time 3 years, basically to 2017, kind of just before the Resource Alliance come together, and you had the knowledge that you have today, what would be the one tip you would give yourself about the European corporate PPA market?
Suppose I can start. I would say a combination of go to market, depending on the specific country, and at the same time stay attentively watching many of the other markets. I think Europe has all the necessary ingredients for a very robust corporate PPA market. They have tremendous supplier base capacity and capabilities. The utilities are very comfortable integrating renewable energy into their generation mix. You have a high level of interest and acceptability from the corporate and industrial base in sourcing renewables. And so I think that naturally, when you combine that with the ever evolving EU directives that are constantly making corporate PPA structures more readily available and easier to execute, I think the market has a tremendous and bright future ahead of it. And so looking back 3 years, I think I would say the same thing. And it's been great to watch it evolve. And Mars looks forward to seeing the region continue to evolve in its corporate PPA flexibility and innovation.
All right. Thanks, Zephyr. Cyndi, would you like to go next?
Sure. Everybody always thinks that Europe is lagging behind everyone else on PPAs, and I can disagree because I worked for the chemical sector, as did Alexis before with Solvay, and the chemical industry has had a type of PPA, whether it be a cogen on site, whether it be a small hydro. I think the problem is that Europeans think that we're behind when we're not. For me, the biggest challenge in Europe is still regulatory. We have countries that we could do PPA no problem in Spain. We have challenges in France because there's subsidies to the electricity market and PPAs are expensive. And then in Poland, wow, for anyone from Poland on the call, but I don't think that Europe is that far behind. And if I go back 3 years, because I've been working in Europe since the opening of the market, I would say be proud of what we've done and just take it to the next step, because we can.
Great. Thanks, Cyndi. And Javier, Alexis, could have one line quick answers from you, and then we can quickly wrap this up.
I would say the piece of advice that I would have given to myself would have been, please don't give anything for granted. So, I mean, 3 years ago, Europe is a short-term market. PPAs are only feasible in the Nordics. Renewable business in countries like Spain is dead. And now, 3 years after that, we see how these long-term contracts are taking a lot of traction and in countries like Spain and others. So I would say that that's the tip. So be ready to adapt to changes because they are coming very fast.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say something similar to Javier, and be ready to deal with uncertainty. Markets move very fast. Regulatory environment also evolves quite quickly. So you've got to stay well acute, follow what's happening, and be prepared to deal with new conditions, pandemics, something arising. So try to stay agile and continue to innovate.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Cyndi, Javier, Alexis, and Zephyr for your fantastic insights today and for being with us. I definitely sense enthusiasm and ambition and positivity about where the market is going, despite obviously some challenges that lay ahead. So thanks again for spending the time with us. And just to finish up, everyone, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to Resource's mailing list and to follow Resource on social media for all the latest news and updates, and to find out more about upcoming webinars in the series airing this month. So thank you very much, and I wish you a good rest of your morning, evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.